Okay, we're Dirty Gaming. This is Roy. I'm listening to you on my headset, but I'm also recording this with Screencast-O-Matic, just a real quick recording. I moved my headset off my ears so I can think and speak at the same time. All right, voltage and current, okay? So you have a device. This is a Raspberry Pi 3B. It's a device, okay? And on the device it says 5 volts DC, 2.5 amps, okay? So what that means is the device needs a potential, that's a voltage, of 5 volts. Now, in most real-world circumstances, a little more voltage is good, but not too much. And in fact, that 6 volts, yeah, that might be a little high. 5.5 would be fantastic. But anyway, what you end up doing is you take that power supply and use a multimeter like a Fluke, measure the volts DC, direct current, and see what it reads. If it reads 5 volts, you're good. Sometimes manufacture crap, comes from China, and has 4.8 volts. I would throw it in the round file, throw it away. So at least 5 volts is what it needs. If it's 5.5, that's fantastic, right? If it's 7.5 volts DC and it says it's a 5 volt DC power supply, throw it away. It's broken. Something's wrong. Now, on the amp side, what it's saying is that device will require 2 amps of power. So the power supply will need to be able to supply that. Okay? What it's saying is they've tested that device under full load, and under full load circumstances, processing and all, the most it'll draw is 2.5 amps times 5 volts is what? 2.5 times 5, that's 12.5 watts, 15 watts rounded up, right? Now, what it means is if you're really pushing that device a little heavier, it's going to need more than 2.5 amps, okay? So you need a higher amp power supply. Well, a 4 amp does not mean that it's going to pump 4 amps in. It's standing by for a load, a device that might need up to 4 amps. So if your Pi that's really overclocked and pushed with bezels and all that is drawing 2.8 amps and you throw it a 5 volt 4 amp power supply, it's happy because it's going to chew up 2.8 amps of the available 4 that power supply can supply. So my point is, you can theoretically throw a 5 volt DC 1 billion amp power supply and your Pi will run just fine at 2.8 amps. It'll be consuming 2.8 amps of the 1 billion amps available. So that is my point. People who are buying these factory power supplies, the ones off of Amazon in that yellow box or whatever that's rated 5 volts 2.5 amps, and they get these special images that consume a lot of power, they'll get the lightning bolt. They'll get the lightning bolt. They need to be running a 3 amp like you're running, and you never see the lightning bolt. Ideally, I would say if you could find a 4 amp 5 volt power supply that has a micro USB, you would be all set. I found some that were high amp 5 volts. The one I'm using is actually 5.5 volts, and it's perfectly happy. That's 4 amps. I actually spliced in a micro USB connector. It's happy. So that is my point here, okay? You can use a power supply with much higher amperage than it says, because it doesn't mean that you're going to pump at that amperage. It can't. The device can only pull as much as the load that it's designed for. It's not some growing power hungry device that keeps going up. So again, if your Pi is running at 2.5 amps and you throw it a 10 amp power supply, it will pull 2.5 amps from that 10 amp power supply of the 10 amps available. But if for whatever reason in the future it jumps up to needing 3 amps, well, guess what? Your butt's covered because it's a 10 amp power supply. Hope this helps.